Welcome to the Bible's Greatest Mysteries from Skywatch TV. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and gosh, this is the best show so far. You and I have done a lot of programs with Skywatch TV. The main show, of course, which you've probably just been watching eagerly every week, but also we did Sci Friday. Mm-hmm. You and I also are doing Unraveling Revelation, which you can watch on many outlets and it's on demand, but also we get to do this now.
This is the culmination, I think, of what we were designed to do. Our interests align with the program, and God bless Tom Horn for seeing our excitement, our enthusiasm for this, and being willing to partner with us in bringing this information to the public.
I know it. We've been at this for 5-6 weeks now. You've been watching us for 5 or 6 weeks, and we have some more guests coming up. We got assignments from Tom Horn that I think are going to surprise many of you that were the guests we're having on. Some you may not have heard of before, but you have a new book coming out.
Yes.
This month.
Yes. This is something that has just grown out of the research that we've been doing for our previous books, Veneration, Giants, Gods, and Dragons. There's an entity in the ancient world who is known by a number of different names, and he's always seems to be hovering in the background as sort of someone who's been forgotten. He's one of the old gods. He's been pushed to the rear. He's been consigned to the netherworld. Uh-huh. There's a new generation of gods, and I'm talking, of course, about the pagan gods who the Jewish religious scholars in the era before the birth of Jesus understood to be the angels of the nations, and who the early church understood to be the gods of Greece and Rome. Mm-hmm. But
if this is brand new to you, if you've never read any of our books and you've just joined Skywatch TV family, we encourage you to read a number of books. Dr. Michael Heiser's Unseen Realm, where he actually explains the divine assembly and the angels that were assigned to look over the nations by God Almighty. Mm-hmm. Your book, The Great Inception, also
Last Clash
of the Titans. Yes, indeed. Our book, Veneration, and Giants, Gods, and Dragons,
right.
Our most recent book together, but we have another one coming out in a few months.
Which will be building on what I've done for the forthcoming book, The Second Coming of Saturn.
But this one, let me interview you for a minute.
Okay.
This brand new book that you have out, why did you decide to write a book about this entity?
Well, it struck me that this entity, who has gone by a variety of names. The title of the forthcoming book is The Second Coming of Saturn.
Oh, well, you just gave it away.
Well,
and we're not talking about the planet.
No. Saturn was the old god of the Romans. He was the father of the generation of gods who ruled Rome at the time of the early church. So the first century church, the apostles, they understood that Rome was under the rule of the storm god Jupiter, his wife Juno, and then a pantheon of other deities, including the likes of Venus, Apollo, who is very important, mm-hmm. Vulcan, and a number of others.
You're saying then that the mythology that we all studied in high school, most of us did, I did, is about real entities?
This is the understanding of the Jews of the Second Temple period. This is the period between the return from Babylon, the destruction of the temple by the Babylonians under Nebuchadnezzar, and the destruction of the temple, the Second Temple, by the Romans in AD 70. It was the understanding of the early church. When you read the writings of the early church fathers, for the first 4 centuries after the resurrection, it was clear that they understood that not only was the pantheon of Greece and Rome and the Phoenicians, who were still very important in that era, they were fallen angels, and that demons were the product of the older rebellion at Mount Hermon, described in Genesis chapter 6 and in the extra-biblical book of Enoch, where a group of sons of God, to be understood as angelic beings, although angel is really not an accurate term, but supernatural entities, probably angel is the easiest term to use, came to earth, saw that human women were fair, and created a hybrid race of angelic human hybrids, giants that the Bible calls Nephilim, later called Rephaim. The early church understood that this was the origin of the demons that Jesus and the apostles cast out during their ministries.
The early church had grown up in a Greek world.
Yes.
They read in Greek if they did have the capability to read, if they'd been trained, but they also understood the Greek philosophy and the Greek mindset, in addition to being raised in the Hebrew mindset.
Right, right. And so there's some very interesting clues in the Septuagint translation of the Bible, which was translated from older Hebrew texts into Greek about 300 years before the birth of Jesus, that show that they understood the connection between the old gods of the Greeks, the Titans, and the giants described in the Hebrew texts, the Nephilim and the Rephaim. There are places where, for example, the valley of Rephaim, where David went out to fight against the Philistines in 2 Samuel 5, is translated into Greek as the valley of the Titans. The Titans were these old Greek gods who, in my book, Last Clash of the Titans, and again in this book, The Second Coming of Saturn, explain that I believe that the sons of God from Genesis 6 are the Titans of Greek religion. Peter, in 2 Peter 2 and Jude, in verses 6, 7 of his short letter, mention angels who had sinned. And in the context of those passages, it's clear that this was a sexual sin. They had transgressed by crossing the species barrier. Jude said they kept not their first estate or their proper domain.
Now, we may have some viewers that, again, may be new to us or not new to us, but may have been taught that it wasn't angels that sinned with women, but it was a different line of human beings.
Right. I address that in the book. We also address that in our book, Veneration, to explain why that sons of Seth teaching, that the sons of God were actually the descendants of Seth, the son of Adam and Eve, is in error. It is logically inconsistent, to put it nicely. But I think the bottom line is this. When you see the phrase in Genesis 6, the B'nai Ha-Elohim, the sons of God, that is a phrase that in Hebrew always, always, always refers to supernatural beings. It never refers to humans.
You know, it seems to me that one of the biggest mysteries, and I mean that in the biblical definition of a mystery, a truth that hasn't been revealed yet, I think it's that whole cover-up. It's become a mystery to many of us because we weren't taught that I was, but many of us in the church, we were not taught that angels came down and went into women and they begat giants. Mm-hmm. It's in the Bible, though.
It is, but that's not been the default teaching. The standard teaching among Christian theologians since the time of Augustine, who was the bishop of Hippo in North Africa, beginning in the 5th century A.D., has been this sons of Seth teaching. They try to naturalize the explanation to get the weird supernatural aspect out of it. But our investigation has shown that, yes, in fact, this was a teaching that began in the 4th century with a Christian theologian named Julius Africanus, and it was popularized by Augustine. And after Augustine, to this day, the standard teaching in Christian seminaries, so Christian theologians today, the majority will agree that the sons of God described in Genesis chapter 6 are actually the righteous sons of Seth. But that doesn't take into account the meaning of the actual Hebrew phrase. It doesn't take it, and that therefore then leaves unexplained a number of very strange verses in the Proverbs, in the Psalms, and especially in Isaiah and Ezekiel that make reference to the council of the Rephaim, the practices of those who were eating sacrifices amongst the tombs. Isaiah mentions in Isaiah 65, and Ezekiel and his prophecy of the war of Gog and Magog with the valley of the travelers and the travelers who will be blocked. When you take that in context with recently excavated and translated pagan texts from the Canaanites, we see that what we're being described there are demons who were believed by the Canaanites to be the protective spirits of their ancient kings, the mighty men who were of old. In Isaiah 14, we see the Rephaim described in exactly that way in Sheol, all who were kings of the earth. It helps to make sense out of some of the weird passages of the Bible. And as our friend Dr. Michael Heiser says, if it's in the Bible and it's weird, it's important.
Well, if this is brand new to you and you're furiously taking notes to talk with your kids or your grandkids about it, don't worry, these are in books from Skywatch TV Store. In fact, one of the great, I think, resources for this is Dr. Michael Heiser's commentary on the Book of Enoch. There are 2 volumes to that.
Exactly. His Reader's Companion to the Book of Enoch, which helps to explain why that book, which is not in the Bible except in the Ethiopic church, but it's not part of the biblical canon, but why it's useful to help understand some of these strange occurrences in the Bible. Genesis 6, which is what Peter and Jude are referring to in 2 Peter 2, verses 4 and following, Jude 6 and 7. Even Peter's description of why we baptize in 1 Peter 3, verses 18 through 20, I believe, 18 through 22 perhaps, where he connects the practice of baptism to the angels who did not obey in the days of Noah, a reference to these watchers, the sons of God from Genesis chapter 6. Jesus proclaiming to the spirits in prison was a declaration of victory, and we echo that every time we baptize. So all of this shows to me that this entity who led the rebellion, named in the book of Enoch as Shemiyaza, was really important. He's described as the chief of the watchers, the 200 who rebelled, who came down to Mount Hermon and decided to take wives among human women. It occurs to me that there's a parallel with this entity who was described as the king of the gods in olden days before he was replaced by a storm god. In Babylon, this was Enlil, who was replaced by Marduk. In Canaan, this was El, who was replaced by Baal. In among the Amorites in Middle Syria, this was Dagon, replaced by Hadad. In Greece, it was Kronos, replaced by Zeus. In Jupiter, in Rome, it was Jupiter who replaced Saturn.
It's the same story.
It's the same story being told.
Odin replaced by Thor.
Odin replaced by Thor. Among the Hittites, it was Kumarbi replaced by Tarhunta, and so on
Over and over again. This is a fake news version of
what
the
really
truth
happened.
of what really happened.
Right.
That is that these angels came down and they replaced the true creator of the world.
They replaced the true creator of the world, who was the sky god, named in Mesopotamia Anu. He was named Oranos to the Greeks. He was Kalos to the Romans.
But let me stop you there. When I say that, I mean the true creator, the capital C,
right.
not the fake news version, which is Oranos or
Right,
Anu.
correct.
That the fallen realm have been trying to pull the wool over your eyes and my eyes and our kids' eyes for millennia.
Yes.
And that is part of a spiritual war that continues to this day, and we have to take a break.
Yeah, but when we come back, I want to explain why the return of Saturn and the return of old Saturn's reign is important, and we'll do that.
Hence the title of the book.
Yes, and we'll do that when the Bible's Greatest Mysteries continues.
Call now and get Pentagon analyst Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis' brand new book, Give Me Liberty, Not Marxism, along with his groundbreaking best-selling book, Progressive Evil, and Dr. Thomas Horn's explosive original expose on the Marxist-driven deep state cabal, Shadowland, with the Shadowland Companion DVD. This is an exclusive offer for our Skywatch television audience. Yours for a donation of $35 plus shipping and handling. Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis' brand new book, Give Me Liberty, Not Marxism, examines what current American leaders, including the Biden administration and his allies, intend for the United States that may very well usher in a biblical prophetic end times, reveals the growing support in America for Marxist ideologies, socialism, communism, progressivism, and what that means for America, explains the Marxist satanic and occult history which influences America's ongoing cultural revolution, provides Christ-centric and pre-rapture recommendations should we come under the grip of a Marxist one-world government, and so much more. This incredible special offer also includes Colonel Robert McGinnis' best-selling work, Progressive Evil, which reveals precisely how radicals in government and in our very own communities are steadfastly redefining America's rights, institutions, and ideals, making her globally irrelevant for the end times. But that's not all. You'll also receive Dr. Thomas Horn's groundbreaking expose, Shadowland, with the Shadowland Companion DVD, which includes the original 5-part Skywatch television investigative series deemed too hot for network television, not available anywhere outside this exclusive offer. This book and DVD series exposes the deep state actors from the Clintons and Obama to Joe Biden and the occult elite who are at war with Christianity and America's destiny, demonstrates the diabolical body count lists and sacrificed whistleblowers who have attempted to thwart the plans of the global elite, and and discloses the occult concepts and practices of a mysterious DC-based shadow empire. Sold separately, these items hold a retail value of $85. Yours now for a donation of only $35, plus shipping and handling while supplies last. Don't miss this once-in-a-lifetime Skywatch TV exclusive offer, the Give Me Liberty Patriot Package. Available now at skywatchtvstore.com. Order now or call 1-844-750-4985.
The Bible's Greatest Mysteries is part of Skywatch TV, a viewer-supported ministry. Every episode of The Bible's Greatest Mysteries is available on the Skywatch TV channel for Roku and Apple TV, and at our free mobile app. To learn more about us and our mission at Whispering Ponies Ranch, log on to skywatchtv.com. Welcome back to The Bible's Greatest Mysteries from Skywatch TV. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and we're going to go to Israel in 2022. We would love for you to join us. All you need to do is go to skywatchinisrael.com, read through all of the information, see if it is something you want to do, and we really want you to go, and sign up. And it's a no-risk thing, because if something does happen and you're required to have a vaccine or something, then Aaron Lipkin says that he will return your money.
Yes, and we'll be talking with Aaron Lipkin in upcoming weeks on The Bible's Greatest Mysteries, because he, like us, is a big fan of archaeology, which is one of the important reasons.
Tom Horn said we get to talk to him.
Oh, yeah.
Boy, Tom's got a great list of guests.
Looking ahead at the guest list.
Yeah. Well, so he's coming back, not Tom Horn, but Saturn.
Yeah, in the first century, well, first of all, this entity, called Saturn by the Romans, went by many different names, and you can see that he occupies the same slot in the pantheon. Saturn to Rome, Baal-Hamon to the Phoenicians, Kronos to the Greeks, the Hittites and the older Hurrians who occupied northern Mesopotamia.
Do you cover all of this in your new book?
Right. All of this is in the book, and basically go into some detail on each of these entities and how they were worshipped. So you don't have to write it all down, just get the book. The Hurrians called him Kumarbi. He was called Enlil by the Sumerians, the Akkadians. He was also known as Dagon to the Mesopotamians. The Assyrians called him Asher, their tutelary god, their patron god. So a lot of different names.
Every civilization has a version of this story.
Exactly. And by the time of Rome, his reputation had been rehabilitated. Saturn was the patron god of their most famous annual celebration, the Saturnalia. The Greeks celebrated it earlier as the Chronia, and we trace it back, my research through what scholars have dug out of the ground and translated from these ancient texts, is that this actually probably began in southern Turkey or northern Syria as a celebration of the old god Kumarbi. But this entity, by all of his different names, had been confined to the netherworld. But in the 1st century BC, around the time, just after actually the assassination of Julius Caesar and the rise of his nephew to become Caesar Augustus, the Roman poet Virgil wrote a series of poems called the Eclogues, and he wrote quoting the Cumaean Sibyl, one of the oracles of Apollo, the most important of the oracles of Apollo in Roman history, that there would be a golden age that would return. Now, this is based on the writings of the Greek poet Hesiod, who wrote a lot of what we know now about Greek mythology, that there were 4 ages of man. The original was the golden age when Kronos ruled in heaven and life was wonderful. Then there was the silver age when the people got lazy and life was not quite as good. Then there was a bronze age where things were awful and terrible and warlike and horrible. And now we're living in the iron age where things are really hard and the gods persecute us and we toil all day long and everything is really nasty.
These are the same metals that the Lord uses in the statue vision that he gives.
Of Nebuchadnezzar.
Yes.
Exactly. And I don't think that's coincidental.
No, it isn't.
Now, Hesiod was writing at about the same time as Isaiah, so just before Nebuchadnezzar, interestingly.
Oh, that's really interesting, especially when you figure that the fallen realm were very much aware of all of this.
Exactly. So the poet Virgil wrote that there would be a return of a golden age when Saturn would return to his rightful place on the throne, replacing his son Jupiter, who currently ruled over this cruel and harsh iron age. But because he cited the Cumaean Sibyl, Virgil was considered a poet. In fact, there were Christians who considered Virgil a prophet, not a poet, but a prophet, beginning as early as the 4th century when the Emperor Constantine legalized Christianity.
And there are other poems that have been written long after the Cumaean Sibyl wrote hers. So you may find things that were actually written by Christians.
Yep, that cite the Cumaean Sibyl.
Yes.
In fact, when you go to the Vatican, you'll see that the Sibylline oracles, including the Cumaean Sibyl, are on the Sistine Chapel. Michelangelo painted them up there alongside Hebrew prophets like Jeremiah and Isaiah and Nahum and Jonah. It's really surprising.
Well, our own our nation's capital has George Washington with a whole bunch of fallen angels up there with him.
And I actually get into that in the book because I believe that and again, with only 5 or 6 minutes here to describe it, there's no way to dive deeply into this. But I believe that the art and architecture of the United States Capitol is a depiction of the imagery that the fallen realm would like us to absorb, that George Washington, as a sort of Saturn figure, has re-inaugurated, brought back a golden age.
Do you know the term inauguration implies
an augur, an oracle.
Yes, exactly.
That's where the origin of the term comes from. I use that word deliberately. But yes, the oculus or the eye that at the top of the United States Capitol, when you look up from the rotunda, you see a painting done in 1865 by Constantino Brumidi called The Apotheosis of Washington. George Washington being welcomed among the pantheon of pagan gods from classical Rome. He's flanked by liberty on one side and victory on the other.
But Vulcan's up there, and Zeus,
Vulcan and Mercury, and yes, so scenes depicting America, bringing about a golden age. But Washington depicted in a way similar to the way Saturn was displayed in his temple in Rome at the base of the Capitoline Hill, which, by the way, is why the United States Capitol is called the Capitol. It's because the temple of Jupiter on the top of the Capitoline Hill was called the Capitolium in ancient Rome. Thomas Jefferson, during the construction of Washington, D.C., the design and layout, insisted that Congress meet in a building called the Capitol. I always thought the Capitol was called the Capitol because that's what you call the Capitol, but that wasn't the case in 1799. There was only one building on Earth where a legislative body met in a place. It met in a place called a Capitol, and that was in Williamsburg, Virginia, Jefferson's home state, Washington's as well. So the designer of Washington, D.C., the architect, L'Enfant, wanted to call it Congress House. Jefferson insisted on calling it the Capitol after the Temple of Jupiter in ancient Rome.
And it was designed like a temple.
It was designed like a temple. The dome is evocative, was inspired by the Pantheon in ancient Rome, which, like the capital of the United States, the U.S. Capitol, has an oculus, an eye. It's just that in Rome, it opens up to the sky, and it was intended to represent the apotheosis of Caesar, the becoming of a god of Julius Caesar and then later Caesar Augustus. Well, in Washington, D.C., it's George Washington who fills that role. But on the inside of the dome, he's depicted in a very Saturn-like way in that his legs are wrapped with purple cloth, purple meaning royalty. But in the temple of Saturn in ancient Rome, the statue of Saturn was displayed with his legs wrapped in wool to represent his binding in the netherworld by Jupiter, except during the Saturnalia, when the wool came off and everybody roles were reversed and everything was changed for the period of that.
That is interesting.
So this is the way Washington is depicted on the inside of the dome, as Tom Horn wrote in his book Zenith 2016. The 72 five-pointed stars around the outside of that depict the Cosmo craters, the gods of the nations, who were believed to serve as the court, if you will, of El on Mount Hermon. El is just another name for Saturn, Kronos, Baal, Hammon. So did Jefferson actually have this consciously in mind when the Capitol was designed? I don't think so. I don't think that Jefferson or Brumidi were consciously trying to say, look, we're building a place, the legislative headquarters of the United States will be named for the Temple of Jupiter, who, by the way, Jesus, in equating Baal, the storm god, and Zeus, the storm god, with Saturn in the New Testament is essentially, not with Saturn, with Satan in the New Testament, identified this entity, Jupiter, as Satan. So I don't think
Zeus is Satan? Jupiter
Zeus is Satan,
Satan?
Jupiter is Satan, yes. Jesus in Matthew 12, verses 22 through 26, is accused of casting out demons by the power of Beelzebul, Baal the prince. Whereas Jesus replied, if Satan casts out demons by his own power, how will his kingdom stand?
Oh my gosh, well, we are running out of time, but really quickly, you believe that Saturn is coming back. He's currently in the underworld in Tartarus, in chains.
Exactly.
But he's going to be unchained and return. How soon?
When we get to Revelation chapter 9, so we got a bunch of stuff to go through before we get there, but when the angel with the key to the bottomless pit arrives, hands it off, the bottomless pit is opened, the king of those who come out of the abyss, the king over those in the bottomless pit is called Abaddon or Apollyon. Abaddon in Hebrew, Apollyon in Greek. Both words mean the destroyer. Interestingly, Solomon, King Solomon, was criticized in the Bible, in 2 Kings, for establishing a high place for Milcom, another name for this entity, on the Mount of Olives, which overlooks the Temple Mount. The Mount of Olives, called the Mount of Corruption, but in Hebrew, the word mashkith actually means destroyer. It's the Mount of the Destroyer. This entity, El, Kronos, Baal-Hamon, Saturn, I believe, is the destroyer, Apollyon, Abaddon, who comes out of the abyss in Revelation chapter 9.
Oh my goodness. Well, yeah, we're getting closer and closer to that. But you know what? It does sound like it's terrifying, but it doesn't have to be if you know Jesus Christ as your Savior, because no matter what the fallen realm are planning, the Lord is just setting a trap to allow them to do that.
Yes, and we know from Revelation chapter 9 that when this entity comes out with his horde of minions to torment those who don't have the seal of God on their foreheads, they only get 5 months. So when Saturn returns to reestablish old Saturn's reign with a new breed of men sent down from heaven, according to the poet Virgil, they only get 5 months. So, and the good news is that if you know Jesus Christ, you will either be protected from having the seal of God on your forehead, or we'll already be out of here.
We'll be out of here.
So thank you for watching. This is the Bible's greatest mysteries from Skywatch TV.